Two engines fall off a Boeing 747. Both of them. Just ripped clean off the wing like someone forgot to tighten the bolts. The plane's still in the air, circling back toward the airport, and the pilots are about to attempt something that's never been done before. Land a jumbo jet with half its engines missing, and the wing shredded like tissue paper. Sounds impossible, right? Because it is. But they tried anyway. And what happened next would change aviation forever, spark international conspiracies, and leave questions that still haven't been answered 3 decades later. October 4th, 1992. Amsterdam, a Sunday evening that started routine and ended with a 747 carving through an apartment building like a missile. But here's the thing. This wasn't just any cargo plane. Israel's national carrier. And the cargo manifest? Well, that's where things get interesting. Keep watching. Let's rewind to 6:22 p.m. Amsterdam Schiphol Airport. El Al Flight 1862. A Boeing 747-200F freighter sits on the tarmac. The F stands for freighter. No passengers, just cargo. Pilots are Captain Yitzhak Fuchs and First Officer Arnon Ohed. Both experienced, both Israeli Air Force veterans. Amsterdam to Tel Aviv with a stop in New York. Routine doesn't even begin to describe it. The 747 is a beast. 4 engines, each one producing enough thrust to keep your house powered for a year. When all 4 are working, this thing can haul 400,000 pounds across an ocean without breaking a sweat. It's the workhorse of international aviation. Reliable, proven, safe. Or so everyone thought. Flight 1862 starts its takeoff roll. Engines 1, 2, 3, and 4 spooling up. The thrust pins you back even in a cargo variant. At 6:27 p.m., the nose lifts. Gear comes up. Amsterdam shrinks below. Everything is textbook. For exactly 3 minutes. The plane is climbing through 6,500 feet when something that should be physically impossible happens. Engine number 3, the inboard engine on the right wing, doesn't just fail. It separates. The entire engine, all 9 tons of turbine, metal, and fuel lines, rips away from the wing and tumbles toward the Dutch countryside below. Now, here's where it gets worse. Because engine number 3 doesn't fall alone. It's attached to the wing by what's called a pylon, basically a structural beam that connects engine to aircraft. When the pylon fails, it doesn't just take the engine. It takes the mounting structure, hydraulic lines, fuel lines, and a huge chunk of the wing's structural integrity with it. And it gets worse. Engine number 4, the outboard engine on that same wing, is mounted right next to engine 3. When 3 departs the aircraft in what can only be described as a violent mechanical divorce, it doesn't leave quietly. It slams into engine 4 on the way down. And engine 4, now damaged and dangling by its own pylon, decides it's had enough too. 6 seconds later, engine 4 also separates. Think about that for a second. 2 engines, gone, in 6 seconds. That's less time than it takes to read this sentence. The entire right side of the aircraft just lost half its thrust and a significant portion of its wing structure. Captain Fuchs feels it immediately. The aircraft lurches. Hard. The control yoke is fighting him. There's a violent yaw to the right. The plane wants to spin because the left wing still has 2 working engines and the right wing has none. It's like trying to run straight when one leg is twice as strong as the other. At 6:31 p.m., Fuchs radios Amsterdam air traffic control. His voice is calm, controlled. El Al 1862, we have an emergency. We lost number 3 engine. The controller acknowledges. Standard engine failure procedure. Turn back to the airport. Single engine failures happen. They're trained for this. The 747 can fly on 3 engines. It can even fly on 2 if needed. But Fuchs isn't dealing with a single engine failure. He just doesn't know it yet. 30 seconds later he radios again. And this time, there's an edge to the voice. Not panic. These guys are too professional for that. But urgency. We lost number 3 and number 4 engine. There's a pause on the radio. Because what Fuchs just said doesn't compute. Engines don't fall off in pairs. The controller asks him to confirm. Foul. Seat, chur. Gone. Right wing. Now let's talk about what this means aerodynamically. A 747 needs thrust, obviously, but it also needs balance. When you lose two engines on the same side, you create what's called asymmetric thrust. The two remaining engines on the left wing are pushing the aircraft in a circle. To counteract this, the pilots have to use the rudder, essentially a giant vertical fin on the tail, to push back against the turning force. But here's the problem. The rudder can only do so much. And when you're also dealing with a damaged wing that's lost a huge chunk of its structure, the aerodynamics go to hell. The right wing isn't producing as much lift anymore. The plane wants to roll right. The plane wants to turn right. And with only two engines producing thrust instead of four, there's not enough power to climb. Folks and Ohad are hand-flying a crippled aircraft that weighs over 400,000 pounds, trying to keep it in the air long enough to get back to the runway. They request an immediate turn back to Schiphol. Controllers clear them for the approach. Runway 27. The same runway they took off from minutes earlier. The 747 is descending. Not because the pilots want it to, but because they can't maintain altitude. With half the thrust gone and the aerodynamics destroyed, the laws of physics are taking over. The aircraft is coming down whether they like it or not. The only question is where. Amsterdam Air Traffic Control is vectoring them back. Turn left heading 260, descend to 4,000 feet. But the pilots are fighting just to keep the wings level. Every control input is a negotiation with a machine that no longer wants to fly. At 6:35 p.m., the crew is cleared to descend to 2,000 feet. They're 8 miles from the airport. The runway is in sight. Maybe, just maybe, they can make this work. Flaps extend. The plane is configured for landing. This is it. But the aircraft is descending too fast. The sink rate is increasing. Fukas is pulling back on the yoke, trying to arrest the descent, but there's not enough thrust, not enough lift. The ground is coming up fast. At 6:35 p.m. and 40 seconds, the plane is at 900 feet. The runway is ahead, but the descent rate is over 1,000 feet per minute. That's almost double what it should be. Fuchs and Ohad are both pulling on the controls. Maximum power on the remaining two engines. Everything they've got. It's not enough. At 6:35 p.m. and 59 seconds, El Al Flight 1862, at an altitude of approximately 200 feet, still a mile and a half short of the runway, impacts the Groningen and Klein Kroetberg apartment complex in the Bewelmermeer neighborhood of Amsterdam. The 747 hits at a 60-degree bank angle. Right wing low. The aircraft is moving at over 280 miles per hour. It strikes the corner of a 10-story apartment building and disintegrates. The fuel ignites instantly. A fireball erupts across the complex, engulfing 3 buildings. The explosion is so violent it's felt blocks away. The building collapses. Floors pancake down on top of each other. Apartments that seconds earlier held families eating dinner, watching TV, living their lives, are now rubble and fire. Emergency services are on scene within minutes. But the devastation is total. The entire corner of the building is gone. Just gone. The official death toll is 43 people. 4 crew members on the plane, 2 pilots, 1 flight engineer, and 1 extra crew member dead heading back to Tel Aviv. And 39 people on the ground. Residents of the Bewelmermeer apartments. But here's where the story takes a dark turn. Many residents of the complex were undocumented immigrants. The Netherlands has never been entirely certain of the true number. Some estimates put the real toll closer to 200. Rescue workers spent days sifting through the debris. Bodies were found in pieces. Entire families erased. The smell of jet fuel and burning wreckage hung over the neighborhood for weeks. But almost immediately, questions started to surface. What was on that plane? El Al is Israel's flag carrier, but it's also known to have close ties with Israeli intelligence. Cargo flights have, historically, carried more than just flowers and electronics. And the manifest for Flight 1862? Incomplete, redacted, and in some cases, entirely fabricated. Initially, El Al claimed the plane was carrying flowers, perfume and spare parts, standard cargo. But then a Dutch newspaper got hold of documents showing the plane was also carrying 190 liters of dimethyl methylphosphonate, or DMMP. That's a precursor chemical used in the production of sarin gas. Yes, The same sarin gas used in chemical weapons. The stuff that's banned under international treaties. And the Israeli government insisted the DMMP was for civilian use. Testing gas masks. Perfectly legal, nothing to see here. But the Dutch were furious. Nobody told them a plane carrying chemical weapons precursors was flying out of their airport. And when the public found out, the conspiracy theories exploded faster than the plane did. Was this a Mossad operation? Was the cargo military equipment destined for Israel's nuclear program? Why were parts of the manifest classified for years? The Dutch parliament launched an investigation. It took 6 years. The final report, released in 1999, concluded the cargo wasn't the cause of the crash, but it also acknowledged that El Ulal had lied about what was on board and that the Israeli government had been less than forthcoming. Even today, survivors and residents report strange illnesses, neurological issues, autoimmune disorders. They call it Bechelmer syndrome. Some believe it's related to whatever was in the cargo hold. The Dutch government denies it, but the medical complaints are real, and the anger is still fresh. So what actually caused the crash? Let's talk about the engines. Boeing 747s use engines mounted on pylons, those big structures you see hanging under the wings. The pylon attaches to the wing with what's called a fuse pin. It's designed to break away cleanly in an emergency, so the engine doesn't take the entire wing with it. Except in this case it did exactly that. The Dutch Safety Board investigated. They recovered both engines from where they'd fallen. Engine 3 was found in a park. Engine 4 in a lake. Both were analyzed. The investigators discovered that the fuse pin on engine 3 had failed due to metal fatigue. A tiny crack, invisible to the naked eye, had been growing over time. Eventually, it gave out. When engine 3 departed, it struck engine 4, damaging its pylon. 6 seconds later, that pylon failed too. Both engines gone. The investigation found that Boeing's maintenance guidelines didn't require frequent enough inspections of these critical fuse pins. After the crash, Boeing issued a service bulletin. Airlines around the world started inspecting their 747s. Cracks were found. Pylons were replaced. But here's the kicker. These weren't rookie pilots. Captain Fuchs had over 11,000 flight hours. Ohad had thousands more. They followed every procedure. They stayed calm. They communicated clearly with air traffic control. They configured the aircraft for landing. They fought to keep it in the air. But the physics were insurmountable. A 747 isn't designed to fly with half its wing missing. The asymmetric thrust was too much. The damaged wing couldn't produce enough lift. And without sufficient engine power, they couldn't maintain altitude. Flight simulator recreations done after the crash showed that even in perfect conditions, with perfect pilot inputs, the aircraft was unrecoverable. The descent rate was too high. The runway was too far. There was no scenario in which that plane lands safely. The pilots were trying to achieve the impossible, and they nearly pulled it off. They got within 1.5 miles, in a crippled aircraft that had no business still being in the air. The crash changed aviation. The FAA and European regulators mandated more frequent inspections of engine pylons. Boeing redesigned components. Airlines updated their maintenance schedules. The fuse pin system was re-evaluated, and hundreds of lives were probably saved because of the lessons learned from Bijlmermeer. But for the residents of that Amsterdam neighborhood, the lessons came too late. The buildings were eventually demolished. A memorial was built, a sculpture called the Broken Tree, representing the shattered lives in the community torn apart. Every October 4th, survivors gather there. They light candles, they remember the 43 officially dead, and they remember the unknown number who were never counted. The Israeli government eventually paid out settlements, millions of dollars to victims' families. But money doesn't rebuild lives. It doesn't answer the questions about what was really in that cargo hold. It doesn't explain why people are still sick 30 years later. And here's the thing that haunts aviation experts to this day. This crash was preventable. A proper inspection would have caught the crack. A better maintenance schedule would have replaced the fuse pin before it failed. But it didn't happen. And 2 engines fell off a 747, and 43 people died, and a neighborhood was destroyed. The black box recordings from the cockpit were analyzed. In the final seconds, you can hear the pilots fighting. The stick shaker is going off. the warning that the plane is about to stall. The ground proximity warning is screaming pull up, and Fuchs and Ohad are pulling with everything they have. The engines are at full power, the controls are maxed out, and then impact. And then silence. El Al Flight 1862 is a ghost story in aviation. A warning. A reminder that even the most reliable aircraft can fail in ways nobody predicted. That a single component, a single crack, a single oversight can cascade into catastrophe. And that sometimes no amount of skill or training or desperation can overcome the physics of a machine that's already doomed. The 747 is one of the safest aircraft ever built. Billions of people have flown on them. But on October 4th, 1992, in Amsterdam, the impossible happened, and the sky fell on Bijlmermeer.